Our next guest is Kristi McVee, who is the founder of CAPE AU, Child Abuse Prevention and Education Australia. As a former police officer, Kristi, who spent a decade investigating child abuse cases and recognised that parents didn't have enough knowledge and education to protect their children. Kristi believed if she could teach parents what she knew, many more children would be safe. The decade Kristi spent talking to kids about what had happened to them and not being able to stop it was so hard that Kristi had to walk away from the frontline duties. What Kristi couldn't walk away from was the pain she knew so many kids were suffering, and that she wanted to do everything in her power to prevent this pain from happening more. The only way to stop child abuse from occurring is if we stop ignoring it, raise awareness and educate. We need to see it, hear it, and get the message out in every way. By taking a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach, she could help prevent children abuse and break the cycle of trauma that victims are so often subjected to. In addition to her experience in the force, Kristi has appeared on TV and was an online safety specialist, not to mention an author of Operation Kids Safe, where this will help parents speak to their children about child sex predators, protective behaviours, sex and consent, and much more. This is a very important subject, so please keep listening. I'm Lisa Smith, your teen confidence coach at Raising Mindsets. I've been working with teens for 20 years, from being in the WA Police as a specialist child interviewer and within the drug and alcohol section. Years after I left the police, I myself had 3 children and commenced a business as a driving instructor. After witnessing the increase of anxiety, low self-esteem, self-harm, low resilience within our teens, I knew I had the skills and education to help change teens' lives. Having received my diploma in NLP, I am providing tools and strategies to parents and teens to work and grow together to help our teens understand the emotions and the world that they are living in. It is possible to change the mindsets of our teens to grow into confident, independent and happy teens. There is no subject in relation to teens that we will not be talking about, so keep listening and enjoy the journey. Hello, Kristi, and thank you so much for joining Raising Teen Mindsets. Congratulations on your book, Operation Kids Safe. How's that going for you?
Good, thank you. Yeah, better than expected, but then I didn't know what to expect. It's sold over 400 copies so far, and being a self-published book, I just didn't know what to expect. And so yeah, it's exciting that 400 families and 400 parents and 400 children, or probably more, are going to have the advice that's in there.
Yeah, fantastic. If anybody is looking around this subject, buy the book, get the advice. Kristi has so much experience, which we're going into now. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Kristi, and how you come in creating CAPE AU.
Yeah, so a little bit about me. If you buy the book, there's an actual section in there about me, and it goes into much more depth. But the short notes version, or the Cliff Notes version, is I became a police officer when I was 28 years old. So just before my 29th birthday. I had a 2-year-old daughter at the time. And so backtrack a little bit, my daughter was 9 months old. I had no job because I didn't have maternity leave when I had my daughter. So I, wasn't sure what career I wanted to do. And when my daughter was 9 months old, having her daily nap, I was like looking in a local newspaper, and there was a big double page ad about, we want women in policing. And I thought, I can do that. I could do that.
That's amazing. I was like, that's good. Like, so you didn't even have the vision. You were just like, oh, this is meant to be.
Yeah, I was just like, oh, that sounds exciting. I could do that. And then it took me close to 18 months to get fit enough and go through the process. It was I decided to join around 2008 during the global financial crisis. And then, and then it took me, close to 18 months to get in. And then, and honestly, I'm 5'1", I've never thought about joining the police before that. I don't know exactly how I even, but I guess things happen for a reason. And I told everyone around me I'm going to be a police officer, and they all laughed because they thought, well, but I'm the type of person, once I say I'm going to do something, I do it. So,
yeah.
and I was just, willing to give it a go, see if I got in, and I got in. So, yeah, my daughter was 2. I went through the police academy, and then I was posted straight up to Karratha for 4 years. So I became I went and worked in regional Western Australia, and whilst up there, you go through a 2-year probation period. And then within 1 year, I put my hand up for extra training to become a specialist child interviewer. Specialist child interviewer is someone who is trained specifically in the interviewing techniques of obtaining evidence for court from children and people with special needs. And so I was trained in that. And from that moment forward, I was on the path of child abuse protection and prevention. I guess as a police officer, you spend more time after the fact, after something bad's happened. So I spent all my time interviewing kids that had been abused. It was never proactive prevention, but it was such an important role. And my daughter, by that stage, she would have been 3. She was 3 when I did the training. And the training actually basically pulled my blinkers off. Like, I, as a mum, I wouldn't say I was naive. I grew up in Port Hedland. I grew up in the Pilbara. I've had a lot of life experience by that stage. I mean, I was 28. I wasn't the typical 18-year-old straight out of school going into the police. So I had a lot of life experience, but I had no idea about this side.
How was that? Because I was at Geraldton Specialist Child Interviewer as well with WA Police. How was that? I didn't have the children at the time, so I could probably move myself away for that. But how was that, having a child and going through and seeing other children going through it?
When I went through the training, I was petrified. I was like, holy crap, no one is going to touch my kid. No one's going near my child ever. Because they explained the methodology, they explained the statistics and the facts, and these were all things that I had no awareness around. I just knew that I don't know about you, but when I first had my daughter, it was like it unlocked a different part of my brain, my psyche, and I became like this. And I was always a protective person. Like, I have friends who weren't shocked that I became a police officer at all, because they were like, you were always the one who stuck up for everyone. You were always the one who did everything for everyone. I was like, oh, I didn't know that about myself. But, and then, going on this training, I just was like, I just want to save every child I can. It was hard. And I don't write in this much detail in the book, but I write about the fact that I was very, very cautious about who I let around my daughter, especially in those younger years, 3, 4, 5, 6, even up until 10. I was like, they had to fit certain criteria. Yes. I questioned who was going to be, if they were going for a play date, who was going to be there. If they weren't, I would prefer to kids to come to my house, because I knew that I was a safe person. And so that was how I mitigated that. But I even had conversations with my mother-in-law about, I didn't want her around any male. And that's funny, because I'm a single parent for 7 years, and my children were young. And for me to have to hand my children over and be around other males, I drilled them from the word go. Yeah. Yeah, I even had, and don't get me wrong, and hopefully your listeners understand where I'm coming from. I even had, from my experience, which after I left the Pilbara, I became a detective. So at 4 years and something months, I became a detective, which is quite early on in my career. A lot of people wait a lot longer. And I focused on child abuse from there. But I even work, from my experience at seeing who abused children and the patterns I saw, I was even wary around my dad and my father-in-law. And not because they showed any signs of abusing my daughter or that kind of behavior ever, but I just was like, I've seen too many people who've trusted the wrong people, so I'm just not going to trust anyone.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it is hard. It is hard when you've actually seen it all and you're thinking, oh my goodness, what's happening?
Yeah.
But
So, I mean, look, and on the flip side of that, over the 10 years that I was, in that job and doing that work, and as a detective, I, investigated child sexual abuse. I charged child sex offenders, and I managed child sex offenders, as well. And then, as well as when I came to Bunbury and was, working at Bunbury Detectives, I was interviewing kids. I did it from start to finish.
yeah.
I learned that there was certain things that they did and certain things that they who they preyed upon, and how they managed to groom families and parents, and that was the thing. As I was thinking about exiting the police, all I kept thinking is if parents knew what I knew, they would do things differently. If parents knew what I knew, they wouldn't trust certain people. I'm a very I observe people, and I always want to know the why of why people do things. I got I got in trouble a lot because I would upset people for asking why do you do drugs? Why do you want to abuse children? Why? And people like or why are you in this situation? Why are you putting up with this domestic violence? Why? And only not because I was condescending or I just wanted to understand people. And yes. I just wanted to understand why they thought that they had to do what they were doing, or why they stayed in those situations, or how they got there. I just wanted to know how they got there.
It's very much curiosity, and that's what. Yeah,
and I was never
the detective role, you have to be, or else you don't get. And
I was never judgmental of people and their answers. Some people say to me, "How could you sit in a room with a child sex offender?" And I was like, because I never judged them for what they did. I just was there to do my job. And I could later on, when after the fact, go, oh God, like, this is horrible, horrendous, deal with it that way. But at the time, I never just sat there and judged them. I was just there to get the evidence and the facts.
Yes.
Yeah. So I did 10 years of that job. And then how I ended up here, as I was exiting the police, as I mentioned, I just was like, people need to know what I know. I would sit at, my daughter's netball or like music classes, and I would be surrounded by parents, and then someone would ask me something, and then someone else would ask me something, and then I'd be, I'm one of those people you either want to be around or you want to run away from, because they either sit with me because they want to hear what I have to say, or they run away because they don't want to hear what I have to say.
They don't want to hear it. Exactly. And that's what you're trying to do, is get your voice out there and get people to listen and to say, yeah, like, there are bad people out there, and we can prevent this from happening.
The beauty of knowing what I know is that I also know what works and what helps parents and what helps kids, and what I've had the experience of speaking to thousands of children in knowing what they need and how parents can help their kids. And that's what the book's about. It's called Operation Kids Safe, a detective's guide to child abuse prevention, but literally it's a parent's guide to child abuse prevention. What you need to know and how you can help your own children, and what you need to talk to them about in age-appropriate ways. It takes all of that fear away from it. I think, personally, I believe the more you know about a subject, the better prepared you are, and the better you can help your own children. And unfortunately, 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 7 boys, or about 1 in 6 boys, will be abused sexually by the time they're 18.
And those are the only ones that come forward.
They're the only ones that come forward, as
thing.
So 1 in 3, and then the statistics vary, but 30 to 50% of all child sexual abuse is done by another child. So so we're seeing, and then I was looking at these stats yesterday for something else, and the Australian Bureau of Statistics believes that at least 1/3 of Australians are a victim of some form of sexual abuse. So that's 33% of Australia, of about 26 million. So you just have to look in your own family. Is one of you or one of them going to be a victim of some sort of sexual abuse? And the other really scary statistic in all of that is that, and this is from February 2022 from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, is that only 1 out of every 3 adults will believe someone when they tell them that they've been sexually abused. So 2/3 of Australians, 2/3 of adults will not believe someone when they say that. And that's what I want to change. I want to change the stigma around talking about it. I want to change I want to educate people or educate parents, because our children need us to do that, and they need us to step up for them, because they can't do that for themselves yet.
But that's what I mean. I was raised, my mum and dad, we never spoke about sex in the household. Never. Oh my goodness, the thought of it. And it just blows my mind now, because my children are very aware about everything. I'm very open and honest, and well, obviously having Google, I was like, just come to me. I will tell you. Do not Google images. Do not Google images.
Well, and I mean, I tell this story in my book. My daughter, I thought I knew everything as a detective, and no, I didn't. But like I thought I'd covered all the bases, and my daughter was 10, and she looked. That was the first time she saw porn, because she Googled sex. And the thing is that we say when our kids ask us something and we don't know what to tell them, we say, Google it. And so when our kids get to that age where they start to, wonder about things, and we're like not telling them the answers, we're just basically fobbing them off, or we don't have that kind of relationship where we can talk to them about this stuff, because we haven't, what's the word I'm looking for? Created that relationship with them. We've basically kept all of this stuff as a mystery and shameful. Then by the time they get to an age where it's time to talk about it, they're going to Google, or they're going to their friends, and they're getting misinformation and bad advice, and then they end up on pornography. Yes. The average age of a child seeing pornography for the first time is 8 years old now. And that's where the problem with that, I don't have a problem with pornography with consensual adults seeing it, but what I do have a problem with is children seeing it, because there's no consent in there. There's no, there's no female pleasure discussed or shown. There's acts of violence shown with gagging and slapping and choking.
Yeah, I call it the cartoon. I'm like, it's just like a cartoon. It's fake. It's all fake.
Well, it is, and it's fake because we don't see, and I have these discussions with adult males usually when I bring this up, but they're like, oh, but there's that discussion happens before they start filming. I said, yes, but that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing the effects of what is discussed before the filming, and it looks, the females look like they're having a good time, or that they're enjoying it, but that's not how everyone has sex. And that's how I explained it to my own daughter. I was like, it's like a movie, like Harry Potter, but for adults, and there's no clothes involved. And, and also, it's not how real adults have sex. And that's why we don't use it to learn. But, most children, by the age of 13, most boys have, they're using sex as their education tool for sexual education. And girls are from 15. They say 13 and 15 girls will be using porn, as their education tool for sex. Now, if they're using, it's like asking them to play Mario Kart and then go and get their driver's license, Yeah,
exactly. So don't worry. As a driving instructor, I've seen that happen. Sometimes they drove on the wrong side of the road. I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Oh, you're game. You're very game.
But going into that, so as a teen confidence coach, I come across a lot of bad behaviours with sexting, pornography, as we've been talking about, social media from both sexes. What advice would you give about technology and what preventative strategies there are?
There's a lot, but the main ones that I would say is that, and if we're talking about teens in particular, my main strategy, or my main thought around this is if you haven't had the talk around sexting, sex, pornography, consent, and there's one more, but I can't think of it. If you haven't had those conversations with your teen, they shouldn't have a phone.
No.
Because the minute they have a phone, they have the world. The world is their oyster. The world is available to them. It's like putting your toddler in a park, a playground, and leaving. Yes. You're basically giving your child a playground, an online playground, and leaving them. So those are the conversations they need by high school at least. And there's no ifs, buts, or maybes in that. Your children are going to be exposed to that because that is the world they live in. That's the world we've left with them.
My rule is to my children, especially, I'm like, if you can't search it with your grandmother and grandfather, or if you can't send the photo to your grandmother or grandfather, don't do it.
Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah.
But like the other things that I think you need to be aware of is that, this is advice from like the e-safety commissioner and police, is that, no phones in bathrooms and bedrooms, because and if you've got an older teen, no closed doors. But that doesn't stop them from doing things. The one thing that I found that works is, and as well, Lisa, like the one thing I found is that scenario training. As a police officer, every year we would do scenario training. We would do scenarios that potentially might happen to us, and we would practice them and run through them, and so that if we ever ended up in that scenario, we got an opportunity. We were already halfway ready to tackle it, right?
Yeah.
So why aren't we scenario training our children? What would you do if? What would you do if someone sends you a nude? What would you do if someone asked you for a nude? What would you do if a stranger asked you to be a friend online? How would you find out if they're actually who they are, say they are? Going through those like dry runs, or like practicing what they can do and giving them an opportunity, give them the opportunity to reply and think about it, and then, help them find an answer.
Yeah. And even parents are blown away by their child can get charged for sending a photo to another child.
Yes,
like,
and that's the thing.
That's a criminal charge, yeah.
Yeah, the legalities, I think that's another thing. When we have those conversations around the sexting sex and all of those things, that's why they need them. Because, once, most people don't know this, but from 10 years on, your child is criminally responsible for what they do. To a point. So after 14, they're criminally responsible. There is no excuse for ignorance of the law, is no excuse. But between 10 and 14, if they didn't know it was illegal or a criminal offence, then if that's proven, then obviously they can't be charged. They'll get a smack on the wrist. But the consequences for children who, and police don't want to charge kids. They don't want kids. They don't want kids with a criminal record for doing the wrong thing. They don't want kids doing the wrong thing, full stop. They
Especially
want kids to
grow up. Especially a sexual charge.
Because that's it has serious. Massive implications. It does, doesn't it? Like, it has massive implications. It can stop them. When I was managing child sex offenders, I had some teens on the child sex offender register that I had to, and they end up with this stigma. There's this stigma. It's not at the way any parent wants their kid to be, start their life, because, our job as parents is to ensure our children are, they are contributing members to society. And I laugh, and not assholes, right? So we need to make sure that they've got all of the tools in their tool belt to get through and become good people in the world, and become the best they can be.
Exactly. So as you said, just being open and honest to your children. So how would teens or parents know if their child is a victim of online predators?
It's sometimes really hard, but I personally don't feel that there's a problem with looking at your teen's phone. Personally, I don't know about you, that it divides parents. They're like, but that's their privacy.
Yes, my children. My daughter has just recently got a phone, and we have signed a mobile contract. So if anything happens, she knows the ramifications from that.
Yeah, and that's something that I wrote in my book as well. Like, and that was something I didn't know about as a copper. I actually learned that when I went into the online, presenting on online safety and online cyber security. That the best way to stop or to help your children, make good choices is to lay it out there before they get the phone. Don't just hand them the world. They get their learner's plates and they have to learn the road rules. Well, they need learner's plates for their phone or for their devices. When they're primary school age, supervision is definitely how you keep them safe. But once they become a teenager, you're obviously going to give them a bit more rope, just not so much rope that they hang themselves. And then, going back to your question, the one thing that I noticed with, when I was dealing with children or young people who had been victims and also perpetrators of online child exploitation material, which is nudes and stuff like that, is they very rarely went to their parents first. And so the reason being is that us as parents, we tend to overreact and we go, that's it, you're losing your phone. You're going to, we're going to take your device off you. We ban it, you lose it for a week, whatever. And that what that does is then children are so scared to come to their parents about problems, which they're going to have. It's not an if, it's a when. They then don't disclose anything to their parents, and then it comes out because the school gets involved or another parent gets involved. So, what I see is depression. Kids get depressed when they're being cyberbullied or they're having issues online. Their behaviors change. They start getting angry or aggressive over their phone. They don't want you to look at it. They don't want you near it. They'll close down their screen quickly. They will either completely ignore their phone, like all of a sudden they've been really solidly texting their friends, and then all of a sudden they stop, and you're like, what is going on with this child? Something to investigate. Or they start being so obsessive over their phone. So they will go from being casual about it to like, oh, I need to do this, they won't put their phone away when they need to put it away at night. Or
as a teen confidence coach, lots of parents describe it as their child's basically similar to a drug addict with their phone. So when they do remove it because they've done something, then it's just like
but we do know that like the phone is as addictive as any type of drug or alcohol, or the brain, the child, even an adult brain has gets addicted to that constant stuff. But this is why setting up boundaries and knowing, like you did, Lisa, with that contract, is knowing the rules before you actually have to enforce them, and having them have a say in what the rules should be and how they should and what the consequences are, means that they are just as responsible, and it's teaching really good life lessons that will happen anyway. So don't just allow your teen to agree to it or your tween to agree to it. Yes, that negotiation, as you said. I used it when I did find out about this. I used it. So my own daughter she wasn't allowed to have TikTok, and she was 12, and she wasn't allowed to have TikTok till 13 because that was the recommended age. But I found out that she was so she would download TikTok whilst I wasn't around, and then delete it, and then download it again and delete it for about 3 months before I realized, because I used to look at her phone at night and check what she'd been doing, but there was and I wasn't looking in the right spot. I just used to look at the apps and look at the messages. Just to check, not every night, but on occasion. Anyway, 3 months later, I find out. So instead of going off my nana at her and I just said, what do you think the consequence should be? And then I said, let's investigate what TikTok's about. And so I sent her off on her way and said, you tell me what the pros and cons of TikTok are, what you think the rules should be around it, what should be the consequences if you misuse it. And similar to you, created a contract around it. And she came back to me and she'd learnt stuff where TikTok, they have challenges that kids have been killed and people are stupid, and people can friend request or request you that aren't real friends. And, strangers ask you for, she did all the work, but by giving her the opportunity to go away and investigate that herself and come to that conclusion, it wasn't me telling her what to do. It was her finding it out for herself and deciding. And even to this day, she's now 15, or just about 15, she still has a private account. She doesn't want a public account because she doesn't want weirdos and strangers. And, she deletes people that treat her badly. Or, we talked about, what do you do if someone's bullying you online? Well, we, report and block them. Or so, she's shown over and over and over again, just from that one lesson of TikTok, how, and she just continues to show me that she actually has that maturity to handle those situations. I don't know how it would have been if I hadn't have stepped in like that, and if I had have lost my temper with her and gone, that's it, you're not allowed it. I think it would have been a different situation. And she did the same with Snapchat. She's done the same, and quite funnily, she when she does go looking for an app that she wants to download, she does a little bit of homework and looks into it before she downloads it. So it's taught her to use her own critical thinking.
Because no tween or teen like to be told what to do. They have to come up with it on their own.
That's it.
obviously going back to like pedophiles and so forth, lots of parents just believe that it's the stranger in the, like when they're walking to the store, that their child's going to be grabbed. What would you say to those parents?
Well, 90% of all children are abused by someone known to them. So, and it's around, it's just so hard with statistics. You know, they can't get them accurate because of the fact that these sorts of offences aren't accurately reported, like you said at the start. But yeah, 90% of all children are abused by someone known to them. The likelihood, and in my 10-year career, like I think I saw one case of a stranger actually abusing a child, like grabbing them and abusing them, that I investigated. It's not to say that there wasn't more, but, you know, personally. And, you know, we do have cases of strangers targeting children. They're most likely going to target your children online. They're the ones that, you know, pretend to be a girl interested in your son or a guy interested in your daughter. They're the type of, they're the ones who are, and there's gangs of these people out there trying to groom and obtain, you know, intimate images of children for this purpose of selling them. That is their whole purpose, and that's what they're doing, you know. So yeah, it's not what we think. It's the people in their lives. And it's not just strangers who groom your children. It is family members, friends, friends of friends, others' children, other, you know, older schoolmates that they know, or, you know, it's cousins, brothers, uncles, mums, dads. You know, I've spoken on this. I have a TikTok channel and I speak about this stuff all the time. And, you know, people are always like, writing comments saying, you know, I was abused by my neighbor's daughter, I was abused by my auntie, I was abused by my cousin, I was abused by my brother. You know, every time I bring this subject up in public, I get so many reports of abuse. It's not funny. And so we've got to, we have the opportunity to change that by educating our children and keeping them safe.
Okay. And if any teens are a victim of abuse, where can they go and what shall they do?
If you're looking for advice, especially for online abuse, cyberbullying, online child exploitation, that sort of thing, you can go to the eSafety Commissioner's website. They have amazing step-by-step guides in there. If it's something that I wouldn't turn you away from going to the police straight away. If it's a child, you've got, you know, your own child comes to you and discloses abuse, go straight to the police. Police are the only people that should be, you know, handling these sorts of situations, because here's the thing, like I said at the start, only 1 in 3 adults will believe someone when they're sexually abused. That's even children. And if a child comes to you, that means they're trusting you to help them do something about it. They want it to stop and they want you to help them. So you need to take the steps, which is go and speak to police, even if it's, you know, just a phone call to the local police station, if it's calling 131 444, you know, asking for advice from a person. The most likelihood they will take a report and then they will go take steps from there. That's their job. But, you know, when it comes to online abuse, you can actually, you know, a lot of children, and we haven't really mentioned it, but, you know, or you have said, you know, they give nudes and stuff. You know, they don't think, I know you can talk more on like the you know, the prefrontal cortex and the fact that it's underdeveloped and stuff like that, but, you know, they just don't think, and they're going to make mistakes and stuff up, right? So the main thing is that, especially with sending nudes, is that we make sure that their nudes are hopefully safe, that we can get them deleted. You know, if they don't, if the person that they've sent them to, if it's a love interest or a boy or a girl or whatever, whoever they've sent it to, if they refuse to delete them, then, you know, go to police. But a lot of the time, these cases, there's not much police can do. And I say that with sadness, because there's not a lot of laws yet in place or legislation in place to protect kids or protect people. There is intimate image abuse laws, but it's only based on the fact that they know where they are and they're, you know, someone they know. And, you know, if we've got some Nigerian person or someone in the UK or someone in the US with your kids' nudes on their computer, there's not so much that they can do. As much, you know, they can notify those authorities and stuff like that. But, you know, the main thing is we need to make sure your child is safe and happy and doesn't feel like a failure. Because a lot of children say to me, when they disclose to me and say, oh, I was, I can't go to my parents, I say, why? And they will say, I don't want them to be upset with me, I don't want them to be disappointed at me, and I don't want them to take my device away. And so if we react like that, then there's no safe place for these kids to go to, which leads to mental health problems, leads to them to trusting the wrong people to help them. So, yeah, we just need to remember we stuffed up. We just didn't have phones to record it all.
Yeah, and when we spoke about before, you're very big, and so am I, on being proactive instead of reactive. So start doing these tools and strategies now.
Small things.
Yeah, before it, and it doesn't, as you said, small, like it doesn't have
believe
to be
me,
these day things.
I know, believe me, as a parent, I have had moments where I've gone, oh, what the fuck? Like I've just, like put my head in my hands and gone, oh my God, what did you do? Like, why did you do that? Especially when it came to the pornography thing. And I had to take some deep breaths and say to my daughter, can you just give me a minute?
Yeah, I do a lot of that. I do a lot of minutes.
And then once I've like taken a few deep breaths and realized that this is a learning experience, we can all learn from this, then I take the moments. And I've had parents, like I said, I have people reach out to me all the time over social media, friends, whatever, and they say, I've just found my daughter's been sending nudes to someone, what do I do? And I'm like, well, first of all, tell your daughter you still love her, or your son that you still love them regardless of what they do, because they need to know that, because they are going to feel so bad. It's just human nature to be sad about disappointing your parents, even though the pressure to actually send a nude is greater than what them disappointing you is. And mostly the kids who have had all of the lessons and spoken to and like know all the risks, they take a lot less risks. And and I've had children or young people where they're still keen on sending nudes because they like the thrill and the rush, right? I'm like, well, here's how you stop it from being about, you can still look. I'm not telling you to send nudes, but what I'm saying is make sure you're not identifiable in that nude, because it could be anyone's nude. You know what I mean? Like harm reduction skills. There's kids out there that will just take the risk anyway. If you've got one of those, I hope you've got a lot of hair dye, because your grey hairs are going to be but you know what, they're just learning, and but how about we teach them a way that they can actually still make themselves feel good about themselves, but not be in risk of like the shame, blame and cultural problems that we have where people they get to school and they're being bullied for it. It's not my nude. I don't know who's nude. I just sent the one I found on the internet, but ultimately the kids that know more about this stuff, I talk to my daughter's friends and I joke around with them like, you haven't been sending nudes, have you? And they'll be like, nah, we're not that dumb. And I'm like, well, okay, well, what do you do when you get asked? And they're like, oh, we just tell them we don't send nudes, or we tell them to send a nude first, or we shame them first, and I'm like, or they just block and report them. So, there's the pressure. And most kids will send a nude before they actually have their first kiss. That is the reality. That is part of the dating society they are in. And that's sad, as it's sad for us, because I used to, when I spoke in front of teens, I used to say, would you just go and take your clothes off in front of a room? Or would you go and take your clothes off in front of your love interest? Well, if you won't take your clothes off in front of them, why are you sending them a nude of your body? But the reality is from the minute they think about it or asked for it, they could have a nude sent in less than 60 seconds. In less than 20 seconds if they really wanted to, So the fact is they haven't had a moment to think through that action and the potential consequences. And that's why if we do that with them before they get to that age, in whatever shape, it doesn't have to be about that, it can be about anything. But if we've done that scenario training that I talk about, then they've already thought it through. And when they get asked, they potentially will think it a lot further.
And that's with anything really with teens these days. They've got everything at their fingertips. Like they want everything right then, right now, because they can, because it's because they've got their phone. So Yes, but absolutely amazing information. Do you have anything else to add before we?
Just talk to your kids and make things not weird.
Yeah.
Like I'm so grateful this happened. But when my daughter was 8, she came home and she was like, I'm never having sex. And I was like, oh, what? I was interviewing kids for a long time by that time, 5 years. And I was like, what do you know about sex? And she's like, oh, it's so gross. I'm never doing that. And I was like, what do you know about sex? And she's like, oh, no. And she wouldn't talk to me about it for a couple of days. And I was kind of a bit worried. And then I just figured, well, someone's talked about it at school. And I ended up, she made another comment while we're sitting in the car. And, she was sitting next to me. We were going to ballet. She was in her tutu. And I just said, as she said to me, oh, I'm never having sex. And it obviously was playing on her mind, right? And I said, well, tell me what you know about sex, because it sounds like someone's told you something. And if there's someone in your year group, they probably don't know the real truth about it. So if you tell me what you know, I can tell you whether it's true or not. And she goes, oh, okay. And, and she was like, it's when a man puts his penis in a woman's vagina and stuff comes out the end of it. And then she like flipped her head to me. We were driving facing forward, and she goes, is it true? And I just went, and in my brain exploded. And because she was 8 and I was in such shock, and I thought, if I don't tell her the truth now, she'll never trust me. That was the one thing that came through. And I just went, it's true. Like in this quiet little voice. And she's like, oh no, that's so gross. I am never doing that. I'm never doing that. I'm going to be a lesbian. I just said to her, do you know what a lesbian is? And she goes, no, but it sounds better than sex. And I just went, okay, we'll talk about that another day.
I was going to say those poor kids. And
but the best thing that ever happened was that, because from that stage forward, I realized everything's a teachable moment. Everything's a learning experience. And then, I said to her, do you have any questions? And then she was like, no, like she was so grossed out. But days later, I went back to her and said, hey, that how we talked about what sex is, do you have any questions? Do you want to ask any questions? And she started asking questions because her little brain had worked some details out, and then, the same thing with the pornography conversation and all of these conversations. At 12, we were talking about masturbation and, and female pleasure and consent. And we'd all been talking about that for years, but nothing is taboo in my house, because I created this safe space for her to be safe, and she also has her friends come to me. She's like, oh, ask my mum. My mum will tell you.
No, that's what, and you have to be careful, don't you? You're just going, oh, should I not? Because I really want to.
I preface all of these conversations with, especially when it comes to my daughter or when she was younger, I was like, are you sure you want to know this?
Yes, that's exactly what
and then I would say, okay. And then I would, I wouldn't just blurt it all out there. I would make sure it was age appropriate, or like, I would soften the idea or the thought or the situation. And, but once we started having those conversations, they just flowed. And there's no, like, I would call our family a sex positive family. We talk about sex in a positive way. We talk about all of the, we watch sex education together as me and my daughter. My husband, he still cringes a bit at some of the conversations, but my daughter has a safe place to go. And whether I had 1 or 100 kids, I would be the same with all of them. And I think that's what we need to harbor. We need to break the mold of what our parents lived with.
Yes, and you're probably in agreement with this as well. For parents who have teens, and are still calling it for JJ or a hoo-hoo or every other name except vagina and clitoris and penis. And what vulva. Would you say? Yes.
And, you know what? That's the reason why kids struggle with talking about it. Like when I was a child interviewer, I would have children that couldn't name their private parts.
No,
like they couldn't name their sex organs. And so trying to get evidence from a child that doesn't know that their vagina is separate to where their wee comes out of, which is their urethra, you used to have to ask questions like, okay, so they touched you in your private parts, but you need more than that. Like, yes. To actually, to actually be able to corroborate to prove that a sexual penetration or an indecent dealing has happened to a child, you have to have the details of what they touched or where the penis, vagina, finger, whatever has gone. And so if a child is interviewed, that's the level of detail they have to try and give. And we have to, as interviewers, we have to get around their lack of knowledge, lack of whatever. So a child who knows those details, first of all, predators are scared of them, because if someone says, hey, let me touch you on your private part, like a child goes, well, my mummy said that I'm not allowed to have anyone touch my vagina. Or no, it's not okay for you to touch my penis. Like the fact that they're already aware enough at 3, and kids can be taught this stuff from as little as 2 to 3 years old, because that's the age where you're talking about bodily functions and bodily parts. And, you can talk about this stuff normally, you can normalize it. And, it will make a predator think twice. And in my experience, predators preyed on kids that were naive, had lack of supervision, and didn't understand what was going on.
Yeah.
It makes it easy, their job easy. So make their job hard by teaching your kids the right ways, the right names.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we could chat all day because that's what we do. However, I'm going to cut it short there. But if anyone wants to know any more information and gather more details, definitely buy Kristi's Operation Kids Safe book.
Yeah.
Which is where?
So you can get it. So you can get a signed copy from my website, www.cape-au.com. It stands for Child Abuse Prevention and Education Australia. Or you can get it on Amazon and on your Kindle if you want to get it on a Kindle device.
Yeah, fantastic. I'll put that in the links as well. Is there any other links that the guys can like you on, or Insta?
Oh yeah, totally. If you're on TikTok, I'm called the TikTok Cop 81.
Nice.
If you are on Instagram, you can follow my author page, which is Kristi McVee Author, or Cape AU. So there's a couple of there. I'm on Facebook as well, with Child Abuse Prevention and Education Australia. So you can follow me there. I've got a little parents group that you can join as well if you want to join. Any of those, you'll find the links in my bio.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for all that information. I'm sure parents will, their minds will be blown at this point in time.
I'm sorry about that.
But again, buy Kristi's book, and then you can get some preventative strategies and so forth to help you and your children out. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Raising Teen Mindsets. If you loved it, please share it on Instagram or Facebook for your friends, and be sure to tag me at Raising Mindsets so I can say thank you. And if you really wanted to spread the joy, you can pop a review on Apple Podcasts. I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to work with me further, all of the free resources and my courses can be found at raisingmindsets.com.au. Now, I truly hope this podcast is so much value and you can use it to bond with your teen and start taking small steps for big changes. Have the greatest day and keep listening.